Welcome to 18th Century Cooking. I'm John Townsend, and today we're going back into a Spanish cookery of the 18th century, and we're doing this very, very interesting spinach recipe. Thanks for joining us today. So this recipe is another one of these recipes out of this New Art of Cookery by Juan Altamires and sort of interpreted and translated for us by Vicky Hayward. This one's called Spinach with Raisins and Pine Kernels. Wash the leaves, put them in a pot with salt and a little oil and let them cook slowly in the water yielded by the spinach and no more. Drain and dress them. Warm olive oil, fry garlic in it, take raisins, be sure to pull off their stalks, lay them in the oil till they swell up. Pour this on the spinach, throw in a handful of soaked pine kernels and a dusting of pepper. Stir well, chop the leaves in the dish where you cook them with your wooden spatula for the sake of cleanliness. If you want, you may boil the spinach before dressing it, but it's not as good. Very interesting recipe here. Of course, Vicky kind of interprets it a little bit for us to help us understand what it means here. But I think he's got a real interesting take on this. And again, look at what's going on here with the ingredients. Very different than English cookery. So for this recipe, we're going to start with the dressing first because the taking care of the spinach part, that won't take very long at all. This dressing actually is supposed to take 4, 6, 8 hours, maybe even better if we let it sit overnight. So let's get started on the dressing. The first thing we're going to do is get some olive oil warming up in our little fry pan here. So our oil is getting warmed up here. Let's get 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. Smashed and chopped up nice and fine. And when I've got those ready, I can put them right into this nice warm oil and get them gently frying. Once our garlic is a nice golden brown, we can take a handful of raisins, toss them in, and then take this off the fire to let them kind of steep and plump up. So again, this will take 4, 6 hours, or even better, to let this set overnight. So our dressing is steeping, getting ready. Now let's work on the spinach part of this dish, the main section here. And I've got a good bit of spinach leaves here, and I've already rinsed these off and kind of shaken them dry. They're not dry, they still have water on them. That's fine. We might be tempted to chop these up. You probably could, but he mentions that if you're going to cut them up, you can cut them up, after they're cooked. So all we need to do is get these sort of gently cooked or wilted. There we go. So we're going to put a lid on that and let it cook for a little while and wilt down. And again, this is very gentle cooking. So I've got this on a very low fire and with a nice heavy pot. So our spinach is cooking up. Let's talk a little bit more about the differences between what's going on in this Spanish cookery of the mid-18th century compared to English cookery that we've done so often. And probably the biggest change, the one that you see the fastest when you're looking through these, is the different kinds of ingredients that show up. Whether it's availability or just an issue of tastes, there's a lot of differences. And in this cookbook, you will find garlic being used, saffron being used, tomatoes being used. In this case, we've got pine nuts. So lots of different kinds of ingredients that you don't see popping up in English cookery basically at all. I mean, they talk about garlic occasionally, but they certainly never use it in a recipe. They actually talk about it being used medicinally. And of course, tomatoes, you hardly ever see any tomatoes, or you don't see any tomatoes showing up in English cookery. You see references to them in other literature, but only being used in other cultures, other like Spanish cooking and Italian cooking, or maybe even French cooking. So very, very interesting, the kind of contrasts we see almost immediately. And we can see, maybe get some implied connections with North America, in that sometimes in North American cookery, you'll find garlic being used, or you'll find tomatoes being used in the 18th century. So obviously some of these kinds of cultures are affecting North American cookery. It isn't just English cookery being transplanted into North America. Well, there is our dish, and it does look really, fun and interesting. It's got a great, wonderful smell to it. Not at all like heavy, weird spinach smell or anything like that. And I can't wait to try this out. Since it's got a whole different mix of flavors, a very interesting combination for the 18th century. So let's give this a try here. Whoa. So I'm not used to sort of the raisin sweetness in here, but actually that sweetness is sort of interestingly contained by the oil that comes with it and the fact that they were kind of plumped up in the oil. And let's find out what, let me get a taste here. It's got a, this spinach has actually got a nice delicate flavor. Really quite good. I might just add a little bit more salt to it, but whoa, a very interesting combination and very different from what you would see in a dish if this were, say, English cookery. So it's really interesting to get these comparing and contrasting these kinds of flavors. Even in this one, we saw all that garlic go in though, right? And I was kind of worried that this would be overbearing with its garlicness, but not so much at all. Very, very gently flavored and nicely complex, along with those oils that come in there, and really super flavors. Really a great set of flavors. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. You got this, wonderful base of spinach, but it's actually very gentle spinach flavor. It's not overbearing at all. We've got, the pine nuts that come in on top, and then the sweetness of the raisin. All these things balancing out. Just a spectacular little dish. A fun way to add spinach into an 18th century sort of a setting. So really, really tremendous. Now, I really can't say enough about this particular cookbook. She does this excellent job of taking, really translating and interpreting these Spanish recipes from the 18th century. She does a lot of research and talking to, people today, and also about what cookery might be like as you go back into the 18th century. And there's a lot, it's just a ton of history here. Just very, very rich cooking history, and such an interesting twist, an interesting difference in the kind of cookery that's going on in, that we've studied in other parts of the world. So if you get a chance, get this book. It's a fun read. Even if you're not going to cook anything out of it, it's just a plain good book to read, and so chock full of great information about Spanish cookery in the 18th century. These recipes are so much fun, so very interesting, and she's already gone to all the work to adapt them into a modern setting. So if you really get a chance to dip into this cookbook, you'll love some of these recipes. They are so very good and so very interestingly historically connected. I want to thank you guys out there for all your amazing support. When you share our videos, you're doing such a tremendous service. So thank you so much for that. And watching, commenting, all of that. Thank you so much for all you do. And thanks for coming along today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.